today's video, guys, I'm going to give you the ultimate guide to your fall food plot planning, so make sure you pay attention. There's a couple different scenarios and situations that you should pay attention to before you pick a seed selection on what you should plant this fall on your deer hunting property. First couple things you should look at is the size of the plot, okay? If it's a destination plot, or say a kill plot, or how many deer that you generally have in your area. The way I usually break it down is if you are in a big woods setting, big wooded areas, closed canopy, maybe there's lack of browse and such, and you have, say, maybe a ½ acre or less to work with, in that type of situation, you're generally going to have a high deer number, so you possibly may want to avoid the brassica mixes because they may mow them down to the ground. If they mow them down to the ground, then you're left with no food. You know, when deer season peaks, say October, toward the end of October, and even during November, your food's going to be gone. I've seen it many times because deer will wipe out brassicas. But again, if you know your property best, so if you're in that type of situation and you may have a low deer number and brassicas may work perfectly fine, consider hybrid brassicas such as Showstopper from Domain Outdoors. That's a good product to use, but just be leery of that on how many deer you have. If you do have that high deer density, you may want to consider just a cereal grain product such as either winter wheat or winter rye, because the deer are not going to mow that down. It's just like your grass in your yard, you know, when the deer bite it, it's going to regrow, it's going to handle that browse pressure. That way you have a traction all fall season to where you're not left without food, because if you're left without food, deer go someplace else, that's not good. If you have more than that ½ acre, then typically you can get away with a brassica planting. Then you start getting into larger plots where it becomes more of a destination food source, which is perfectly fine. You just have to make sure you're able to hunt over that, because if you have like little kill plots and stuff, they're going to hit those kill plots and then eventually work their way out to that destination, whether that's on your property or maybe on a neighbor's property or an ag field. So that's kind of how I look at it on, big wood setting. Usually when I'm doing like, client trips, consulting and stuff, I will take all that into consideration. And again, you live there, you hunt there, you know the property best, so you should generally know if you have a high deer density, which you just have to gauge it off of that on what exactly to plant. Jumping ships here, if you're in an ag situation, generally you can get away with a brassica planting because the deer have so much to eat right in the areas, because they got all the beans, they have more browse and stuff. And typically you can get away with that brassica planting because you're not going to have that many deer pounding it once you get it established and grown, say end of August, early September. So I found in those ag situations where sometimes the deer may not eat the brassicas right away. They may have to get used to them a little bit, or you can actually mix in some cereal grains in there a little bit. That'll get them started, such as winter wheat or winter rye. I've done that many times last year. Or another good plan with that is to plant your brassicas and then mix in some type of clover. I did that last year on my property that's full of ag. It's an ag country, to where I planted bombshell and then also threw a jug of comeback kit in, which now that lasted all fall and into the winter months. Now here we are in July, and I just posted an update video about the clover. Clover is beautiful, deer are hammering it. So there's many different situations. You just have to be careful what you pick, and choose, because everybody wants that ice cream crop of brassicas, but sometimes they may not be the best fit. Those ag situations, when you're planting food plots, they may not hit it very hard. It's very dependent, from property to property. But if you can have that unpressured food source on your property, you will attract all the deer in the area, as long as it is unpressured. Destination food, kill plots, they're two completely different scenarios, and you should hunt them differently. Just be leery about it. Make sure you can get in and out of your food sources, especially if you're hunting around them. You got to make sure you can get in and out of there. Does will handle a little bit more than bucks. You can only bust them out of there a few times, then you may have to give it a rest. I've done it in the past, especially since it could be the only place that you have to hunt. So you may overpressure, but just realize that if the deer aren't hitting it, especially during daylight hours, it's most likely because of high pressure situations. Well, how do you remedy that? Well, you have to be careful. You don't want to spook deer. You may have to get somebody to pick you up, let like a vehicle or side by side or something bust the deer out of there. We've done that. We've used coyote calls from like a YouTube, find like howling sounds, things like that to spook the deer out of the food plot. They tend to forgive that more than if they actually see a human being. Human being is not good, especially on a food source. It's just going to make those deer either not use it or use it at nighttime. Be careful on seed selection. Planting brassicas is a completely different situation than planting cereal grains. Most times I feel like cereal grains are a better option because deer will hammer winter wheat, winter rye, especially if it's not pressured, and you can't wipe it out. The deer can be in there every single day, all day long, and they're just not going to wipe it out. Not only that, but if you truly want to feed deer, planting cereal grains in the fall is an excellent option because those cereal grains, such as I prefer winter wheat over the rye, but that'll be the first thing that greens up in the wintertime, providing the deer an extra, depending what part of the country you're in, an extra 4 to 6 weeks of food before all this green stuff pops up in the spring. So you can feed those deer many pounds of food per acre per their daily requirements, to feed them and nourish them, give them nutrients and stuff, and always work on your soil and control weeds, and have plantings. Always want to have something green and growing in your food plots, guys. If you guys want to learn more about food plots, plantings, and seed selections, give this video a watch right here and subscribe so you guys don't miss any videos.